from New Consulting, and welcome to New Talk, a video series that highlights businesses and organizations that are sparking positive change and celebrates the people who are making it happen. Today, I'm here with my friend and client, Nina Riggle, an entrepreneur, sustainable sewist, and meditation teacher. Nina has her master's in biology and taught science classes at the American Museum of Natural History in New York City and environmental science at Eastern Iowa Community College. This spring, she sewed and gave away around 400 face masks to underserved people in her community and is still offering a buy one mask, give one to a person in need today. We're talking about how Nina uses sustainable fabric in her work. You'll also hear about how she creates a sustainable lifestyle by being more mindful of what and how we're eating food, and some easy ways that you can incorporate more sustainable practices in your life. And you guys went hiking yesterday. How was that?
It was really beautiful. I'm enjoying watching my daughter grow in her endurance and ability to walk on rocky paths specifically.
Was that a big adventure?
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of, a few recently hikes to waterfalls, and it's been a lot of fun hiking up dryish creek beds until there's water, and then skirting around the water up to the waterfalls has been really pretty cool.
Cool. Why don't you start just telling us a little bit more about yourself, because you have a science background, you're creative, you create all these unique sewing projects and quilts and meditation. So can you just talk about how you got to that point?
Yeah. So my name is Nina. When I went to college, I was really focused on learning more about the planet, specifically animals. I grew up always wanting to be a veterinarian or a zookeeper, someone who really works with animals, promoting conservation. And really, the more I learned about the world, the more I wanted to share that with other people. And I learned through zookeeping that I didn't really want to be a zookeeper so much, because that's just a farmer for exotic animals. And while it was really interesting and I learned a lot and I would never go back and change it, I learned that I didn't want to be a zookeeper from being a zookeeper. And then got a chance to maintain a live animal collection while teaching young children at the American Museum of Natural History in New York. And I loved it. I loved inspiring children to learn more about what they were already excited about, because most young children already have a natural affinity to animals and nature. And so just taking that natural curiosity and elaborating on it was a lot of fun. When I left New York City, I began teaching environmental science at the collegiate level, and began a path of inspiring adults of all ages to consider the environment when making choices in their life. And that really is what propelled me on a path of living a more sustainable life myself and finding ways to come about having my own business. So part of being sustainable is like closing the loop, closing the gap in your life. And one of the ways that I could do that for myself was building a business that would generate the income I needed versus looking outside of myself for that income. So that has been what brought me to building my own business. All the things that I do for my business are things that I've gathered along the way that I really enjoy and want to share with others.
Good. So can you talk about like what kind of animals you kept at the Natural History Museum?
Yeah, absolutely. The live animals that we kept at the museum were mostly reptiles, amphibians, and small mammals, fish, anything that could fit into a tank or a habitat that is negotiable for smaller spaces. A lot of reptiles, snakes and lizards. There we had a tarantula, we had different kinds of cockroaches, grasshoppers at different times, snails almost always, pill bugs, which are those little roly-poly bugs, which are actually crustaceans and not insects, interestingly enough. And then fish. There were a bunch of fish tanks and tortoises. Yeah. And then small mammals, so we had chinchillas. That was our small mammal of choice in that
Okay.
program.
Aw. So that was a lot of, that's a lot of creatures.
It is a lot of creatures.
So,
I definitely learned a lot about animal husbandry during those days.
yeah. What do you think is the most important part of that people should know about sustainability?
Yeah. Okay. So sustainability in a nutshell is being able to live and sustain the life that you want. And not getting things from outside. Our world is a closed system. It's a biosphere. It's one thing. All of what we need is within this sphere. Sunlight comes in from outside of that sphere, but that's kind of like the cue that gets all the cycles on our planet running. And so the idea of sustainability is to live your life in a sphere and not just for example throwing trash out and not knowing where it goes. That is an opening in the sphere, right? So you're throwing that trash out, you don't know where it goes, it's not in your loop anymore. And I'm not saying don't throw trash away. Absolutely. We have to do that from time to time. We all have to release refuse in a lot of different ways. But it is about making that little gap in our cycle smaller and smaller and being able to sustain ourselves as individuals, as families, as communities, and then eventually, taking it bigger and bigger as nations and then as a planet, as one planet.
Great. And then can you talk about what you do, just a little bit about what you're doing in your life to be sustainable?
Yeah, to maintain a sustainable life here at home, wow, there's so many things that I do.
You do a lot.
I keep trying to think of like even how I just started this path to becoming more sustainable. And I think the first thing that I did was focus mostly on food and how I ate and where it came from and how it left my house. When I was a kid going to 4-H camp during the summers, they would always measure how much food we threw out. And that was how much food other people couldn't eat because we just threw it in the garbage. And our goal every summer was to get that down as close to zero as possible. The way we do that in our home now is I buy from local farmers whenever possible. I make as much food at home versus buying prepared food as often as I can. And really just trying to maintain the idea of purchasing from people who are local, who are nearby, who I know aren't trucking things in from all over the world. Now, that can't happen with all things. Like I can't get bananas in Pennsylvania. So obviously there has to be some amount of opening that gap to allow in what I need, what I want as a human, because we have creature comforts now with our modern world, and there's no reason we shouldn't be allowed to have them because we're trying to close this gap.
Okay. So you did 2 farm shares over the summer.
Yeah.
And I know, like, I'm intimidated by farm shares because it just sounds like, especially because it's just me and Corey, my husband. So, talk about how much food you get with the farm share and then how you managed all of that.
Yeah, I honestly went into the summer planning to sign up for one and ended up working out like work trade with 2 different farms. And I was really excited for that and the prospect of that. And the reason I decided to just go ahead and go with the 2 is because I do a lot of canning and preserving and freezing of food. And so I figured, I can handle it and I'll be fine. Well, I ended up living most of my summer in my kitchen. Between my garden and the 2 farm shares we signed up for, I was spending a lot of time doing canning and freezing. So the beginning of the summer, the spring, late spring and early summer was a lot of greens. And eventually the household decided to boycott the greens. We would eat as much of the lettuce as we could, and I would give away what we couldn't eat. But all of the dark leafy greens, like beet green tops, which you can eat, kale greens, there might have even been some other greens, I would rip them off the stems, put them in Ziploc bags, and freeze them. Now, using Ziploc bags is not my favorite way to freeze. However, this year, with everything that's going on, I'm using what I have available to me and not not so much weighing in on the sustainability aspect of it. Typically, I like to reuse jars and things like that. But even freezing leafy greens in things like Ziploc bags, you can always rinse those out with warm water, warm soapy water, and reuse them in your home for something else. And so that's one of the things that we try to do to reduce the amount of, for example, baggies that we're throwing out.
How much food is included in a farm share?
Yeah, it depends on the farm you sign up with, and it depends on how the growing season is going. We got a bout of dry weather here, so for a few weeks we got a little bit less food than we did on the other weeks. I would say I got a grocery bag from each farm every week.
Okay.
And some of those groceries were repeating. We'd get beets one week from the one farm, and then we'd get beets from the other farm, or we'd get carrots and we'd get carrots, or we'd get a lot of lettuce in the spring, which is why we gave a lot of lettuce away to neighbors and friends.
If somebody wants to start thinking about food sustainability and they're
Yeah.
busy, they feel intimidated, like what are some easy ways people can get started on becoming more sustainable?
Yeah, I think I get that question quite often, and it's interesting going into people's homes who've never had me over before, and they get intimidated. They think that, oh, if they have bags of chips or things like that, I might get offended by their, ability to just eat junk food. But I totally buy chips all the time, and I totally throw bags away. Like these things all happen in my life. But the one thing I encourage everyone to do, and the thing I did myself, was I began just watching my trash can and just kind of being more mindful of what was going in that trash can, what was going in the garbage bag, what was headed to the landfill that I wasn't being conscious of. So watching the garbage can and the garbage bag and just being mindful of what goes in it was a first good step for me. And watching what I was recycling wishfully or not, like knowing what my local recycling could handle and learning what it couldn't and seeing those containers build up. Like I would hang on to containers that couldn't be recycled just to see them stack up, to be more mindful of it, to become more conscious of how I was using plastics and other resources within my own life. I would say the easiest thing to do for food sustainability first is cook less, especially if you don't like leftovers. Just cook less. Cook less food, and then eat your leftovers the very next day. We make omelets a lot. So if we have leftover vegetables, we'll make omelets the next day with the leftover veggies. Um, or eat that meal for lunch the very next day. I'm the one who does that a lot in my house. It also for busy families, a leftover night is a great way to use, not reuse, kind of, to use those leftover meals and save time, right? And if you're anti leftover, then I would say definitely just cook exactly what you need and don't cook extra. The other thing is just start checking out your local farmers market. Find out if you have one when they're open, and then just start buying your favorite things there. Like you like apples and you don't really cook too much with raw fruits and vegetables, fine, buy apples. Start there. Start where you're comfortable with the things that you like the most and you want the most in your life, and then it becomes something you do out of joy and out of love. So you buy some apples and you're like, oh, the apples are all going bad, but I really like apple crisp. Then you find a recipe that says how to make apple crisp with fresh apples. Google becomes your best friend. That's what I found over the summer. I didn't know what to do with a lot of things or how to keep a lot of different things. For example, beets. Like, what do you do with a beet once you have it in your home? I didn't know because we're not beet eaters. So I had to Google, and I found out that for me, keeping them in a bread bag, that an old bread bag that was going to go in the recycling bin anyway, put all the turnips, or that works for turnips too, put all the beets in one bag, put them in the refrigerator, and you can kind of just, they'll be okay for a while. I did lose quite a few beets because I might have neglected them, but that happens, and it's okay, And then there comes that mindfulness practice of compassion, like we're imperfect, it's okay.
I'm going to move over to sewing because
Yeah,
you are just a talented sewer. Can
thank
you
you.
talk about how you got into that?
Yeah, I am a sixth generation quilter, so it is deep in my blood and in my bones. I don't think I ever could have gone through life without sewing. My mom taught me how to sew when I was around 12 or 13 years old. I would make projects for 4-H fairs, and that's where it started. I will say that as a teenager, it was almost too precise of a science for me, and it required too much patience and too much attention, and I really just couldn't handle it. I made one quilt when I was living in New York City. But then when I left New York and began a different self-healing journey, that I really got into quilting, and like within my first year, I don't even know how many quilts I made that first year. It was a lot.
We made me and Corey one, and we love
Yeah.
it. And it's on
Yes.
our couch right now. So, and
I
it's
love I
all we're
love that quilt.
using it again. So no, it's so pretty. So talk about some of the stuff that's in your shop, and like about the sustainable sewing and all of that stuff.
Sure. So part of watching my trash can was watching all these fabric scraps go into the garbage bag. And I was like, man, like, I don't want to be that guy, but what can I do with all of this junk, with all this garbage, with all this usable fiber that's just going into the landfill? How could I use that? And I let that question kind of being my driving force for a number of years, probably 2 years before I even considered how I could actually use those fabric scraps. But then, as part of my journey in yoga and really getting into meditation and sitting every day for a practice, I knew I needed to commit to having a bolster as for my practice, something to sit on to raise my hips so that I could sit in a way that was comfortable. And I didn't have the money that I needed to buy one. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to make one. I found the fabric I liked, and I started saving my fabric scraps. I stopped putting them in the garbage bag, and I started putting them in a box and saving them and waiting. And then when I had enough, I began stuffing the cushion. And I still have that, and I sit on it every day. And I have made several more since then using the same concept. I will say that over the beginning, over the last few months, I've made a lot of face masks and generated a lot more fabric scraps, and I need to make a lot more yoga cushions. So if anybody wants one, let me know.
Okay.
um,
So
mhm,
going to the masks, like
yeah.
talk about how all of that came about.
Yeah, I got a Facebook message one day from a friend here in Williamsport, and they worked in elder care, and it was becoming real evident that they were going to need to have masks, provide their own, and they didn't know what was going to happen for the near future. And I heard that from a few different people in elder care in my area anyway. And I began working with her and my sister, who is a neonatal nurse, to begin developing masks. I started on my own, just kind of trying to willy-nilly find my own design that I liked the best, and then found a group of sewists out in Ohio that were making masks and developing them with doctors and nurses, and I liked their patterns.
And they're available. And what I really like is you do like a buy one, give one.
Yeah, yeah. When I first started making them, they were all for donation. Anybody could have them for free, and if they wanted to donate any amount of money, I was willing to accept that. And it came to a point where I needed to refocus my time and energy back on generating income. And I decided I would shift the mask, and they would still be available for sale through my shop, ninariggle.com. And then for every mask I make and someone purchases, I have one that goes out into the community. And I have donated a lot of masks through the generosity of others. And I'm very grateful to be able to say that and
Okay.
do
And
that.
it's 400, over 400.
My original donation, my donation masks was over 400. I
That's
donated
a lot
over
of masks.
400. Yeah. And then I really kind of stopped counting after that because it was a little tiresome to even think about how many masks I had made. At this point, I would say that I've probably made at least 600 masks. So another 200 that I've made that have been half purchased and half donated.
You just opened in July.
Yeah.
And you created your own custom e-commerce pathway. And any of us who do marketing or e-commerce anything like know that that can get very painful. So, and that's just the nature of a business. Like it just is painful. So talk about how you went about developing your website and your pathway.
Sure. When I first started selling my fabric sewn items, I was doing a lot of craft venues and craft fairs and things and having really mixed results. And I realized that more of my orders was going to people, friends and family who knew that I sewed and would call me and be like, will you make this random thing for me? And so then that was when I kind of got the idea that maybe I better approach a wider market than just whoever comes to these craft shows. And I looked at Etsy, I looked at Shopify, I looked all over at the different e-commerce platforms, and I just wanted something different. I wanted something unique. I wanted something custom. And I decided that because this was my business and this is what I was putting my heart and soul into, that I deserved it, that I had to invest the time and the money and the effort into having a custom website built. And it has definitely been a journey. And it's up and running now, and I'm so grateful for it. And it's continuing to, grow bigger and better every day. And I love it.
Good. Can you talk about going through the process of creating the website and the pathway? What do you wish you would have known?
Yeah. It's interesting because I've learned a lot on the journey, and a lot of it has had to do with just being on the journey and not knowing. And what I wish I would have known before I started was to have a really concrete idea of what I want for my business. I've had this really multifaceted idea for quite a long time, and it's really been hard to kind of tease out the detail of what that looks like. And I've definitely been able to do that. I've learned a lot about all the intricacies that go into the actual build. There's a lot that happens to make sure that that button click does exactly what you want it to do. And I think I took that for granted, and in order to ensure sustainability, I actually collaborated with a friend of mine, an old friend of mine from college, and we're working together to build the website dream, right? And it's been a journey of healing for us as friends, and a path of discovery for me to really truly discover who I am and what I want for a business and how I want to promote sustainability and in general just kind of share my life with others, right?
Is there anything else that you want people to know?
Sustainability is its own journey, and learning how to live within the means of your environment is something that takes time, and the only thing that you need to do is take the first step.
Thank you for watching New Talk. You can learn more about working with New Consulting on marketing, growth, customer service, and management by visiting newconsultingfirm.com. That's newconsultingfirm.com. See you next time.